is a very specific type of betrayal that happens to people who support their spouses through graduate school. It's an unspoken phenomenon. You spend your 20s working yourself to the bone, eating cheap pasta, driving a broken-down car, and paying every single bill so your partner can study. You are the stepping stone. And the heartbreaking truth is, once they reach the top of the stairs, the first thing they want to do is kick the stone away. My name is David. I'm 36 years old, and I work as a logistics and supply chain manager. When I was 26, I married Elena. Elena was brilliant, driven, and her absolute biggest dream was to become a cardiothoracic surgeon. Medical school in the United States is notoriously brutal, and it's insanely expensive. We made a pact. Elena would focus 100% on her studies, and I would carry us financially. For 8 years, through 4 years of med school and the beginning of her residency, I worked a grueling 60-hour week at a shipping company and then drove an Uber on the weekends. I missed Thanksgiving dinners. I missed my best friend's wedding. I wore shoes with holes in the soles so Elena could afford her USMLE exam fees and professional scrubs. I didn't mind. I loved her. I believed we were building an empire together, and I was just doing the heavy lifting in the beginning. I couldn't have known that my reward for 8 years of blind loyalty would be a meticulously planned financial assassination.
Everything changed when Elena matched into a highly competitive surgical residency program at a top-tier hospital. Suddenly, she was Dr. Elena. With the new title came a completely new personality. She entered a world of elite surgeons, luxury hospital galas, and god complexes. And her primary mentor was a man named Dr. Vance. Vance was a 45-year-old attending surgeon. He drove a Porsche 911, wore bespoke suits under his white coat, and was married to a woman whose family sat on the hospital's board of directors. Elena started talking about Vance constantly. Vance let me close the incision today. Vance thinks I have the best hands in the program. Then, the classic residency red flags started flying. First, her schedule became completely unpredictable. She would claim she was on a 24-hour call, but when I dropped off dinner for her at the hospital, the nurses would look confused and say she had clocked out 4 hours ago. Second, the absolute disrespect. Elena started looking at me like I was a peasant. I was the guy who made sure the mortgage was paid and the laundry was done, but to her, I was just a blue-collar logistics guy. During a dinner party with her new doctor friends, she actually laughed and said, "David is sweet, but he doesn't really understand high-pressure environments. He just moves boxes around." I had moved boxes around to pay for the very food she was eating, but I bit my tongue. Third, the mail. Elena became obsessively secretive about the mail. She put a lock on her home office door, claiming she had HIPAA-protected patient files inside.
The discovery wasn't an accident. It was the result of a credit alert. I have a credit monitoring app on my phone. One Tuesday morning, while I was at the warehouse, I got an alert. New account opened. $310,000 consolidation loan. I froze. I immediately logged into the credit bureau. It was a massive private student loan consolidation from a third-party bank. My name was listed as the primary co-signer. I never signed anything. I left work, drove home, and kicked open the locked door to Elena's home office. I tore the place apart until I found a locked filing cabinet. I popped the cheap lock with a screwdriver. Inside, I found a pristine printed copy of the loan agreement. There was my signature, forged perfectly at the bottom. She had even used a digital notary service, likely using a copy of my driver's license she had scanned months ago. But beneath the loan documents was a printed email thread between Elena and Dr. Vance. I read the words, and my blood turned to ice. Vance wrote, Are you sure the loan went through? You need to lock him into the debt before you file the papers. Elena replied, It cleared yesterday. Since we live in a community property state, the lawyer said if his name is on the private consolidation, he's on the hook for half of my medical school debt when we divorce. I'm serving him next week. I can't wait to finally be with you and be done with this deadweight life. I sat on the floor of the office. She didn't just cheat on me. She used my flawless credit score to forge a federal financial document, saddle me with $155,000 of her debt, and run off with a millionaire surgeon. She wanted to financially enslave me for the next 20 years.
They say hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Well, they've clearly never met a man who spent 10 years paying for a degree only to have it weaponized against him. I didn't confront her. I didn't yell. In logistics, if there is a massive error in the supply chain, you don't panic. You track the source, you gather the data, and you eliminate the bottleneck. I took high-resolution photos of every page of the forged loan document. I took photos of the emails. I put everything back exactly how I found it, and I replaced the cheap lock on her cabinet so she wouldn't know it had been opened. When Elena came home that night, she complained about how tired she was. I rubbed her shoulders. I asked her about her day. I smiled. I played the loving, clueless, deadweight husband to absolute perfection. The next morning, I took all my PTO from work and started building my nuclear arsenal. I didn't just go to a divorce attorney. I went to a high-powered litigator who specialized in white-collar financial crimes. I showed him the documents. He looked at me and said, David, forging a cosigner on a loan across state lines using a digital notary isn't just a divorce issue. That is federal wire fraud. That is a felony. She is looking at prison time and the immediate revocation of her medical license. I smiled. I know. Let's get to work.
This is the strategic buildup. We submitted an affidavit of forgery, along with IP address logs proving I was at my warehouse 30 miles away when the document was digitally signed on our home IP address. The bank quietly froze the loan, pending internal investigation. But I wasn't done. I needed to destroy Dr. Vance, too. I hired a private investigator. Within a week, the PI had a mountain of evidence. Photos of Dr. Vance and Elena entering a boutique hotel downtown, time-stamped during hours they were both supposedly on shift at the hospital. I also researched the hospital's bylaws. The medical board had a strict zero-tolerance policy regarding attending surgeons having sexual relationships with residents. It was considered a massive ethical violation and an abuse of power, directly actionable for termination. Furthermore, Vance's wife wasn't just wealthy. Her father essentially funded the hospital's new pediatric wing. I had the forgery. I had the affair. I had the hospital bylaws. Now, I just had to wait for Elena to spring her trap so I could reverse it.
Elena served me with divorce papers on a Thursday. She tried to look sad, giving me a fake, rehearsed speech about how we had grown apart and how she needed to find herself. I acted heartbroken. I begged her to stay. I wanted her to feel like she was in total control. A month later, we met for our mandatory mediation session to divide our assets. Elena walked in looking incredibly smug, wearing a designer suit I had likely paid for. Dr. Vance was waiting in a Mercedes down the street. Her lawyer slid the paperwork across the table. As you can see, the private student loan is a joint liability, signed by both parties. My client is willing to let David keep the 2010 Honda Civic if he assumes his 50% share of the $310,000 debt. My lawyer, an absolute shark, didn't even look at the paper. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out 3 thick folders. He slid them across the table to Elena. "What is this?" her lawyer asked. "Folder number 1, my lawyer said smoothly, is an active fraud investigation from the bank. complete with IP logs and a sworn affidavit proving your client committed felony wire fraud by forging my client's signature. Elena's face drained of all color. She looked like she was going to throw up. Folder number 2, my lawyer continued, is a draft of the letter we are sending to the state medical board regarding the felony fraud, which will trigger an automatic suspension of her medical license. And folder number 3, I interrupted, leaning forward and looking dead into Elena's terrified eyes, contains the photos of you and Dr. Vance at the Marriott. A copy of this is scheduled to be emailed to his wife and to the hospital ethics board at 5 p.m. today. Her lawyer looked at the documents, closed his briefcase, and looked at Elena. "You lied to me," he whispered. I gave my ultimatum. You take 100% of the debt. I keep the house, the retirement accounts, and all savings. You waive any right to alimony. You sign it right now, or you go to prison, and you never practice medicine again.
She signed everything. Her hand was shaking so badly she could barely hold the pen. She walked out of that office completely broken, saddled with $310,000 in debt, with 0 assets. But I am a man of my word. I told her I would give her the deal if she signed. What I didn't tell her was that the bank's fraud department is legally obligated to report wire fraud to the authorities, regardless of our civil divorce settlement. 2 weeks later, the police visited her at the hospital. She was arrested for forgery and fraud. Because it was a public arrest, the hospital was forced to act. As part of their internal investigation, the affair with Dr. Vance came to light. The ethics board was completely ruthless. Dr. Vance was fired for gross misconduct and abuse of power. When his wife found out, she not only divorced him, but her family used their immense influence to ensure he was blacklisted from every major hospital in the state. He went from being a millionaire god surgeon to an unemployed pariah paying massive alimony. Elena was expelled from her residency program. Because of the felony conviction on her record, her medical license was permanently revoked by the state board. 10 years of school, completely erased.